Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be going over Void Crit Warriors Fury Warpath. So, I wasn't even supposed to be playing Warpath right about now. I was actually planning on playing it like a month away from now, around when 1.0 is coming around, right? To get ready for the next season. But I had a lot of discussion about Void Crit Warpath the other day on my stream and in recent times as well. And that is mainly because there's a variant of Warpath out there called Apathy's Maw Warpath that Maxwell and Lone Star McFluffin have guides for. The concept of the build is to essentially make it so that you can hold down the right click for Warpath, right? And not have to exit that until the end of the monolith. And that build is really good if you want to just relax and turn off your brain and hold right click through all the monoliths and stuff. But the biggest problem that I've had with it so far is a lot of people, they'll play that build, but then they'll complain about the damage. And that is because of how the button economy works in Last Epoch. Right now, as it currently stands, if you want to do damage, you're going to have to press buttons. Like, there are not many builds that do all the damage with only one button pressed. You have to press buttons to do extra damage, essentially, right? And that's actually what this build is right now, is a variant of Warpath that, of course, presses buttons to do more damage. You have to do a little bit of maintenance on your mana, but you get a lot more damage as a consequence. But of course, this build isn't for everyone. Not everyone wants to press a bunch of buttons just to play builds, which is completely understandable. And that's why builds like McFluffins exists. But then those people, they'll come back to me like, oh my god, I'm not doing enough damage. This does no damage. I'm like, well, you're kind of playing a build that goes out of its way to ignore damage for quality of life. So there's kind of like a trade-off there. You can only have so much quality of life while also ignoring so much damage, right? So at that point, there's only so much you can do. So that actually ended up me playing this build, which is Void Crit Warriors Fury Warpath, which is an update to the old build that I played about a year ago now. Dang, it's been that long since I played a Warpath build. I feel a little filthy right about now. I used to be like the Warpath King around here. But yeah, so this is the entire concept of this build is to just play Void Crit Warpath, but with dual wielding and also doing Warrior's Fury. Warrior's Fury is a node that makes it so that your Warpath gains more damage and more area the longer you hold down right click, right? And it makes it also cost more mana per second. Now, what this does is it turns your Warpath build from a hold right click and forget everything into a actual build you need to like pay attention to your mana and pay attention to your buttons and stuff. But you get a very large amount of benefits from it. You do a very large amount of damage with this version of Warpath. So, like for instance, on the dummy right now, my height of my damage numbers is around 200k per hit crit, and that is about like I think currently right now it's like about 4 attacks per second with my budget gear, and that's 4 per echo. So that's like 12 attacks per second. So technically, right now, that's like 2.4 million DPS. And with as low of investment as I've put in my current character, that is very impressive. Now, of course, that's the height of DPS. That's not like the median. I would say like a million is like a good like stopping point, like an average for the build. The problem is the build kind of like ramps up, ramps up, ramps up, and then stops. So like it's hard to actually calculate the DPS, but it's better just to visualize the numbers. Yeah, Warriors Fury, Crit Warpath. Another thing that we're utilizing today is, of course, Eye of Reen. I was stupid. Now, with the new adaptive changes, right, you can actually utilize Eye of Reen instead of a normal katana and get a very large amount of stacks. Like you can see on my bar, on some bosses, I get to 50 to 60 stacks. So, to put the math on that, right? Each stack is like 5% melee crit multi. So at 50 to 60% stacks, we're getting to 250 to 300% free melee critical strike multiplier just for having Eye of Reen in our weapon slot. That is because the echoes that we cause also count for Eye of Reen. which means, of course, they stack Eye of Reen stacks, and we also get Eye of Reen stacks, which means you can get a lot more Eye of Reen stacks than you normally could with a normal build, which is amazing. Now, we weren't able to do this before, and that is mainly because of course, adaptive damage. So, for instance, now that 40 flat melee damage that's on the implicit of Eye of Reen, that used to be melee physical, which would make it very anti-synergistic with, of course, Void crit Warpath, right? But now with the adaptive changes, since our Warpath is Void damage, that means that 40 flat melee flat damage is now melee void damage, which makes up for the fact that, of course, we're using, a sword that only gives us a little bit of melee fire, which doesn't really assist us too much technically. But of course, like I said, now we also get the 300% crit multi from Eye of Reen, which is ridiculous, right? So this build's been a bit of a ride. So let's go in game and talk about the build more in detail, right? All right, so before we go in game and talk about the build, let's talk about leveling. So I actually did a mock leveling experiment for Void Crit Warpath, and this is what I ended up with. So we are going to be leveling with Hammer Throw. So the idea is we take 1 point travel into Winged Hammers, we wait for 2 extra points, right? Because you don't want to be grabbing Steadfast Path as it ruins your damage, it doesn't give you more damage. But then after that, you can get the point into Iron Spiral, which then, of course, turns you into a hammer throw build, which is great. Then we grab the 2 points here and catapult for the extra projectiles to give us even more damage. Then we beeline for weighted hammers, and then we fill out the rest of the points in ballista. And that's pretty much how you level as hammers. Now, of course, on your gear, you want to be looking for like physical percent damage. You want to be looking for throwing flat damage as well. You want to be looking for minus mana cost rings as well, and of course, movement speed. I have a Morning Frost. I'm only wearing this because it has a bunch of movement speed on it early on. I dropped it and it was like, why not? Let's put it on, right? But any kind of movement speed boots here would be great. And of course, capping your physical resistance is also very important as well, as a lot of things do physical damage to you. And by this point of the monolith, you also want to be starting to cap your elemental resistances. And this is how I essentially leveled as Hammer Throw. Then, once my Warpath tree looked good enough, right, I swapped into, of course, Void Crit Warpath. So I did a respec. I put on some better weapons for Void Crit Warpath, right, with some melee crit, some attack speed, stuff like that, right? And then I also respec Hammer Throw into Reversal, and then later on you'll be turning it into the Reversal from this planner, right? And this is how I leveled from this is how I would, I'm sorry, this is how I would go about from leveling this to this. I didn't actually level this in game because I was playing on my soft core account, like in online. So it's like the other account where like I had a bunch of characters already leveled. But essentially, what you would do is you would play this build, and then eventually transition into this build once you get up higher levels. Now, one thing I want to note is while you're actually leveling the build, I would heavily suggest not doing any of the Warrior's Fury tech. Most of the Warrior's Fury tech is what I would call an end game thing. It's not something you want to be doing for early game, but if you just follow the rest of the build without actually touching Warrior's Fury, you'll do completely fine. Not even a problem. All right, that's leveling. Let's go in game and talk about the build in more depth, shall we? All right, so here we are in game with the character. Like I said, I didn't invest too much into this character. All I did was throw on an Eye of Reen, go on my stash, and pull out a bunch of different Warpath gear, right? We didn't really like go too crazy with my gear. Everything's just got like one exalted affix, and for the most part, most of my gear is pretty bad. The only piece of gear that like I would call is actually good is like my pair of boots. My boots are pretty okay. But other than that, the rest of this is kind of like vendor trash for the most part. Like you could farm this kind of stuff in like a few days. It's not even a big deal, right? But yeah, Void Crit Warpath. Let's talk about skill, shall we? So for Warpath here, we take 2 points travel into Unchained, 1 point into Reckless Spin. This will make it so that we have less mana. So the main reason why we're grabbing this, even though we're grabbing Warrior's Fury, is when I actually start channeling Warpath here, you'll notice my mana doesn't take, my mana takes a while to start ramping up, so that when I reversal, I gain all my mana back. If you did not have these points here, right? What would happen is your channeling would happen too fast, and then your reversal wouldn't have enough time. So let me show you here. So if I hold down the right click here, right? So you see how it takes a second for the mana to start uh, spooling up, right? If I did not do it that way, if I did not like, set it up that way, what would happen is my mana would be consumed too much. So that's why we have 3 points here. And then, of course, 1 point travel into Quicksilver Wind, 1 point into Warrior's Fury. Like I said, Warrior's Fury makes it so that you have more damage and more AoE, but it consumes your mana. The reason why this is so good is because, as you can tell with him, he's actually channeling the Warrior's Fury. Let me show you. See? Yeah, he's getting bigger and stuff, and he'll do more damage as well as he's like existing. And you can essentially do a very large amount of damage by making your echoes do Warrior's Fury for you. See, like, as you can tell, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? It's a lot more noticeable though when you have more points into Warrior's Fury. Then 1 point travel to Iron's Reach, 4 points out of 5 in Whirling Steel. If you had +4 to Warpath, you put an extra point in this, and you get a bunch of more damage, right? Then 5 points into Cyclone of War. The main reason we're using this is not only do we get the base crit, right, helping us cap our crit. So if we look at our crit here, we're at like 84% crit thanks to this, right? And we also, of course, get the 10% global melee health leech with an X. This means that we don't need as much leech in other places, so we can ignore the leech in Anomaly, and we can ignore leech on gear, and we can mainly just get most of our leech from our Cyclone of War. And of course, Echo Knight here, right? Apocalypse World, then eventually Maw of the Deep, getting us all of that more damage, right? Lots and lots of more damage. Then for Anomaly, it's your stereotypical buff Anomaly. The main things we care about is putting on Time Bubble, making it so that it's on top of us and having a duration as like a 12-second duration or something like that, I think right now, because we have Lingering Memory as well. And that means while it's on top of us, it's giving us 150% increased crit chance, 20% attack and cast speed, and 30% additional cooldown recovery speed. This will apply to, of course, reversal. So if I turn it on here, we'll go from 8.8 to 7.1 cooldown, which is great. That's really useful as it will make it so that it's easier to get that. Eventually, you can get a little bit of cooldown on gear here or there, like maybe on the boots or something, which would make reversal have even more of a cooldown, which would be wonderful for you eventually, right? But we'll get into that later. And of course, sigils, stereotypical DPS sigil setup with void stuff, just getting a bunch of void damage. So here, 12.9k, right? And we're going to set up the reversal. Almost doubles our damage just for existing because it gives us a lot of flat void damage while also giving us a lot of percent void damage. Now, of course, you don't technically need to use this on bosses if you don't want to. I just do it because I like damage. And of course, lunge, stereotypical lunge setup. Main thing I like about lunge is this node here. It makes it so that you can sustain yourself even if you're not attacking things, and that's really good for a build like Warrior's Fury, where like you're not always technically attacking. You might be waiting for your mana to come back and stuff like that. So having a way of sustaining yourself that isn't directly leeching is wonderful, right? And of course, we get the coal here as well, and that's pretty much it for lunge. Now, let's talk about passive tree, which passives we care about. We mainly care about stuff like this, attack and cast speed, right? Attack speed is great. The dual wield node, right? Then for Paladin here, just getting to 15 points so we can get Sigils of Hope, of course, right? Then for Voidknight here, getting some extra leech is great. We go from 10% leech to 21% leech, which is 22% leech. Yep. You're having all the flat damage as well, and some extra crit multi, some HP here, which is great. The echo stuff, right? And all of that means that we can just do even more damage, which is great, the echo stuff. And that's pretty much it for the passives that we care about. Now let's talk about gearing. So for our weapons, we are running a Shadow Cleaver with Melee Void. Thanks to the adaptive changes, this is a really, really good weapon because it's giving us like let's see here, 37 plus, it's like 78 flat damage on a one-handed weapon. That's a lot of flat damage. And of course the attack speed, the shred armor as well. Then for the Eye of Reen here, we don't have anything on it. Mainly, all we care about is the melee crit stuff, and of course, all the extra crit we get. This boosts our crit significantly forward. It gets us from 300% crit, essentially, all the way to 600% crit very easily, which is wonderful. Then, of course, the amulet here. Crit, mana. I have a little bit of mana regen, then HP and res. Chest here, Warpath, HP, Vitality, right? Well, you could have a much better chest than this. I just kind of just pulled it out of my stash. Then of course, Ring here, crit and reses mainly. I'm running silver rings. You don't have to run silver rings. I just like silver rings for movement speed. You could technically run a copper ring here or there to help you cap your crit early on, but you eventually want to transition to silver rings because you want to be going fast, right? Then for the belt here, mana regen, HP, of course. Other silver ring, res, and crit, right? Like this ring is like almost vendor trash. It just has crit exalted on it, right? So I'm using it. Gloves, some attack speed, and some HP is one of the best places to get attack speed. So you definitely want your gloves to have attack speed on them. Then, of course, the boots, HP, movement speed. Then for the relic, crit and strength. Yep, that's pretty much it for the relic. You can have like HP on this. There's some better relics you can have later on. Then, of course, that's pretty much it for the items. Now for the idols, we want idol like this. Increased echo damage and skill echoes. This makes it so that we do even more damage when our echoes are hitting things. And of course, the increased melee void damage. Same thing down here. Just gives us a very large amount of increased damage for our, specifically our echoes. Now, of course, melee void damage here, melee void damage there. You can also get it with Warpath area. You want as much Warpath area as humanly possible so you can like hit the entire screen. Then we fill it out with resistances. And that's pretty much it for the build. That's pretty much it for the video. With all that being said, this has been Dread. Off to go do something else. Bye.